Right now is the time for D.C. to get its priorities in order. They're cutting food stamps for tens of millions of Americans, but subsidies for oil companies, they are A-OK. What is going on here? We've got a pattern that ought to bother everybody. We'll break down the shocking facts behind basically the house of hypocrisy. And next, Zimmerman's brother, he's now worried about people taking the law into their own hands. Well, that sounds a little ironic, doesn't it? We're going to have that and much more as the nation reels and we hear from a juror here on that stunning not guilty verdict. And later, are the tabloid twins a liability for Democrats here? Spitzer sounding off on how Weiner's candidacy might impact his own. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. We'll have Dominic's one-on-one conversation with Elliot Spitzer and also a very revealing conversation Andrew had with a veteran to talk about the backlog here for vets trying to get in the VA system, all coming up this hour. But first, thank you for joining us on what has become a very busy Tuesday evening, July 16th. Now, you know the old adage, be careful what you wish for. Well, for the past 3.5 years, we have spotlighted how dysfunctional Washington has gotten, thanks in large part, if not entirely, to the obstructionist Republicans and more specifically, the 40-some-odd Tea Party folks who revel in the idea of grinding D.C. to a halt. And it's not all done in the name of fiscal responsibility like you've been told. It turns out that these same folks can actually get stuff done. Unfortunately, it turns out that it's stuff that hurts a whole lot of people and people in need. Now, if their version of fiscal responsibility apparently means helping the people that they like and the people who like them, well, the rest of us, they get the cold soldier and the insults as well to boot in the process. And for more on the party putting the dis and dysfunction, we're bringing Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And Andrew, the one thing is, I think people are fed up with Washington, but I think that there's this impression out there that they're grinding everything to a halt, and that's not the case here. Some stuff gets through, the stuff they like. It's the other stuff that ends up going by the wayside.
And it certainly makes you wonder, Rich, how they're occupying their time, particularly in one small section of the House Republican group. Let's start with some good news, though. At least some of the Republican obstruction in the Senate appears to be over, at least for now. But as Rich mentioned, getting rid of obstruction isn't always good news when what does get done can be even more divisive and dangerous. The Senate today finally began moving on several of President Obama's long-delayed nominees.
Is there anybody out there in America that thinks this body is functioning well?
But only after Democrats threatened to use the so-called nuclear option.
If we don't pull back from the brink here, my friend, the majority leader, is going to be remembered as the worst leader of the Senate ever.
And that's the improvement, a change from the new normal of political obstruction and constant deadline brinksmanship.
I think we're going over the cliff.
We need to honor the sequester. The American taxpayers deserve that.
Plus the cuts that come with them, including to military academies, Head Start students, and other popular programs that actually work. Sometimes it's not just the dysfunction in Congress. After all, a functioning Congress has consequences too.
Student loans, that's how I'm here, or how I'm here.
It's bad news for us students because we're going to be in a bad situation.
And now, food stamps. Last week, House Republicans removed food assistance from its farm bill, putting the program in peril.
Unfortunately, sometimes food gets put on the back burner.
This will even be harder for people to feed their families.
Yeah.
Why so many cuts hitting so many? Here's one congressman's explanation.
I was looking Matthew 26:11, the poor will always be with us. And then I looked at 2 Thessalonians 3:10, for even when we were with you, we gave you this rule, the one who is unwilling to work shall not eat.
But other people's money is available when Republicans want it and when it helps GOP supporters, like subsidies to oil companies, tax breaks for companies that offshore jobs, increased orders for fighter jets even the Pentagon doesn't want, and a boost in farm subsidies. Just don't think mom-and-pop farmers, think massive corporate agribusinesses and farmers who have gamed the system, like Congressman Fincher.
Congress has lost touch with the mainstream America.
Fincher made $3.5 million on farm subsidies since 1999.
We have to bring back to small business, tax cuts, to cut spending.
And for Fincher, that means food stamps.
The one who is unwilling to work shall not eat.
So $134 a month for people on food stamps gets cut, while Fincher's farm subsidy goes up. more than $22,000 a month and counting. Food stamps, by the way, kept an estimated 4.7 million Americans out of poverty in 2011. Republicans on the Hill are now talking about cutting off that lifeline to 2 million Americans or more. Rich? Thank you, Andrew. And for more, let's bring in our panel. Ryan Davis, veteran of the Howard Dean campaign and current vice president of Community Advocative, right? Thank you very much. It's a new startup here. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist, former vice chair of the National Black Republican Association. I'm sure you're very happy to talk about this first subject here. But this drives me nuts. There are some guys who intellectually believe that you want to starve the beast, you want to shut off the government, cut off the water. Now, I don't agree with them, but at least intellectually, I respect that they practice what they preach. But what drives me crazy are the phonies, like Andrew just pointed out, with these guys who say, hey, got to pay as you go here. You can't be spending money on anything unless you find a way to fund it. Okay, forget that we just had 2 wars that they never bothered to spend a single dollar here to pay for them. He wants to give himself and other huge agribusinesses a cut here, but somebody on food stamps, he wants to cut them off. And by the way, that doesn't mean that they're not going to eat. The state's going to have to make up the shortfall for it. It's just the latest example, Richard, of the phonies here that I think are killing your party.
Look, the real issue at the end of the day is that more people are on food stamps than ever before. And that's because the economy is in the tank. The African American community, minority community at that, both African American and Latinos have a higher unemployment rate than their white counterparts. If there was employment, if the Obama administration would focus on economics, we wouldn't have this increase in the food stamp program.
Is he helping the situation or making it worse?
Well, listen, at the end of the day, that's all bluff. That food stamp cut is not going to pass. It's got to go. We have 2 houses.
Why vote for it then?
It's symbolic of saying we need to control costs.
Okay, but then if we want to control
an economic
hold
plan.
On a second.
That's
if
what
you
it's
want to
symbolic
control costs, then how does a guy in the same voice approve and maintain that he wants to give tax cuts to the Mobils, to the Exxons of the world, but he doesn't want to pay for the student loans? And then on the flip side, he doesn't want to pay for food stamps. So he's going to give himself, as Andrew said, more than 22 grand in his pocket, but he's not going to give somebody $130 to put food on the table every month.